Monkey.
I'm just gonna be talking about something here. I'm gonna be talking about how defunct 50s, 60s, and 70s underground niche book publishing houses that have long since died. And I'm gonna use at least 3 examples or 3 niche underground book publishing houses that have gone out of business before the mid 80s. And some of them have gone under in like all of the 70s, and some of them have gone extinct in the 60s, and some of them have only lasted for at least like a good 3 years, 3 or 4 years tops in the 1950s before filing for bankruptcy prematurely. And with that, I'm going to be talking about how with the way things have been going, a lot of people in the 50s, 60s, and 70s had like sleazy book publishing company, like sleazy books being published by sleazy book publishing companies that were underground niche ones that were not very well known or very big at the very beginning. And some of these motherfuckers are, namely 3 of them, are still niche, still to this day. Still to this day, a bunch of niche ones have absolutely, unequivocally went out of business before the 90s, before the mid to late 80s. Some of them were the ones who have had the whole sleaziness patted down. And it was before video. Sleazy videos have taken over the market. Blatantly taking over the market. And I'm just saying, maybe, just maybe, if they were to have survived up until now, just imagine all kinds of sleazy literature could have ever hit the store shelves. But the very legal ramifications and legal consequences led to their departures, layoffs, and bankruptcy, and them shutting their doors. It's not easy being a sleazy underground niche book publishing company that publishes smut. And the book publishing companies that were assigning said titles and promoting and advertising installments of these sleazy smut titles and turning them into franchises. But as soon as video came around, things haven't been the same. And that changed the game. But we all know 50 Shades of Grey took inspiration and the recent book publishing house that's responsible for the 50 Shades of Grey book being the sleazy book that got a movie of it made. But to be honest, given the crazy shit like literature and crazy ass smut movies at the time, yeah, it seems like the very 50 Shades of Grey movie is pretty fucking tame compared to that of some of the hardcore shit back in those days. And let's not forget, it only got crazier when like chat lines started popping up. These smutty chat lines, they started popping up in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and nowadays you barely even see any of that shit on, like, advertised on TV. Started in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. Nowadays, you don't see chat lines like that anymore being advertised and promoted on television. Granted that smartphones were coming out in the 2000s. Started with the cell phones that were for cars in the 80s, mobile phones in the 90s, and instant open access to AI, where chat lines have fallen like kinky, perverted, sleazy, naughty, and downright pornographic chat lines were popping up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the 2000s. And in the 2010s, they kind of fell off. They kind of fell off when AI started becoming a thing through chat bots. And some of the chat bots that were the proto AI companions, and yet this human connection over the phone had long since died out. No one uses sexy chat lines anymore. Kind of think of it, no one uses landline-based arcane chat lines anymore. Since how landlines at home landlines are no longer a thing. And the only place landlines have ever survived up until this day was government buildings and corporate buildings. The home is where all landline connections have died. And now smartphones have taken over the home. And now it's completely taken it over. And I saw it change. I saw a massive change. And I saw how when you know, the VHS videos that were sleazy was just basically VHS tape porn that took over, where sleazy books have fallen out of favor. And they've been falling out of favor. Like defunct sleazy books have fallen out of favor and was starting to fall out of favor. And was started back in the 1930s and 40s, but through magazines. And that's where they got their start, was Playboy. And Playboy was the OG father of the sleazy literature. Nowadays, it's all romance titles that are fucking tame as shit compared to what was released back in the day. There's some pretty kinky shit that was written and published back in the day when, you know, sleazy literature was a niche market, but it was still profitable back in those days. And I'm just saying, there are 3 defunct book publishing companies that I've never even heard of until I wound up getting 3 books, and then bam, they all started plopping up into my collection of literature. And I'm just saying, it would be nice to know why they had legal problems. Or was it due to the nature of the content and the age grouping of the characters and the stories? And let's not forget, conservative groups wound up having to boycott them through news media, getting City Hall involved, which got the news media involved, which got them fined to oblivion, and spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars at the time, and roughly around like 27 or $270,000, which would equate in $1 million to $1 billion or so dollars in the last 30 years money, which would equate to 2/3 of $1 trillion into present day's money, which would have been $270,000 fine back in those days. And back in those days, a lot of them were fined $270,000 into in last or 2/4 of centuries money. And if you had to pay $270,000 back in the day, your niche publishing house was basically bankrupt back in those days and had to close your doors. Nowadays, in the year 2026, it's $1 trillion company and $1 trillion investment. But back when, back in the 80s, back in the 90s, back in the 2000s, $1 million and $1 billion was the biggest fucking like net worth at the time. If you were a million/billionaire back in those days, 30 years ago, back in like the 90s, back in the 2000s, back in the 80s, if you were a millionaire, you were like top notch. And millionaires in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they were the ones who had a lot of stakes in shit, namely Hollywood. And if you were like making billions of dollars, you're basically a billionaire. And back in like the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, if your book publishing company that was still around from 1950, January 1st, 1950, to December 31st of 2019 or so, your company would have made trillions of dollars. And yet, back in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and you were making billions of dollars, you were basically a billionaire back then. Nowadays, from 2010 to present day 2026, you'd have to be a trillionaire. Someday, that number is going to go the fuck up to decillion. And I prophesize that within the next 50 years, decillion will be the gold standard. And you'd pretty much would have to own literally 1 to 2/3 of everything in the media. 1 to 2/3 of studios, movie and gaming studios, TV studios, own 2/3 of them to be a decillionaire. And having to have a stake in the legal, like sort of 1/3 of a stake in the government sanctioned legal system, which in turn has a lot to do with the legal system. It is crazy. And who knows? Maybe something might replace Decillionaire. Something might replace Decillionaire and become, or somebody might become an octillionaire. Who the fuck knows? Maybe octillionaires might make being a millionaire, being a billionaire, being a trillionaire, being a decillionaire look like small little potatoes someday. And you'd have to have 3/5 ownership of everything in the entertainment business. And in all of media, leaving a niche for burgeoning up-and-comers. And being a millionaire, that shit's not gonna impress somebody someday. Being a millionaire, yeah. Being a millionaire ain't gonna get you by with people someday. And I have a hunch that the decillionaire, the octillionaire, will be the gold standard, where trillionaire will be the new million/billionaire. And I have a hunch that quintillionaire will be the final boss of wealth status. And trillionaire, decillionaire, and octillionaire will be a thing of the past. And quintillionaires, they'll own everything. They'll own the media, they'll own the government, they'll own everything. Absolutely everything that they'll own. They'll even own the countries. They'll own the like all the companies. They'll own everything. The quintillionaires, they will be the apex predators that will own every industry, everything. They'll own absolutely everything. Absolutely everything they will own. And these book publishing companies, these niche ones, I'm gonna drop their names right here, right now. Valley Secrets, Harding Fetish Files, Pleasure Books. These were the niche ones that have absolutely hit had basically hit like all-time low. And they closed our doors because they had to pay $270,000, which that ain't much by today's standards. $270,000 ain't much by today's standards for book publishing house. These days, that shit ain't nothing. That shit ain't gonna cut it when it comes to legal ramifications and fines for book publishing companies these days. They could pay that shit no fucking problem these days. But back when niche book publishing houses faced legal problems and financial constraints and legality and consent and business partnerships, they've had a long-standing since ever extinction. These were three of the major niche main three book publishing housing that was involved with the sleazy books that they have made, published, got anonymous authors to get their works done, and then some. Some of them started in the 60s, and in the 50s, and in the 70s. And by the time the 80s rolled around, they closed their doors and went bankrupt and went out of business. But I will showcase them at some point in time. Showcase the books that led to them being on a rapid decline in the early 80s. And why they faced legal problems at the time of the publication of the books. But anyways, I wanted to get on here and talk about the very thing that I needed to talk about.